Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna tackle a subject today that we're gonna probably have to do a couple of these. It's AI and how it's going to affect you. And we have Julian Mueller-Kaler. He's a senior fellow, director of Strategic Foresight Hub at the Stimson Center, which I have no idea what that means, where he studies global trends, emerging technologies, and their impact on society and politics. He's also chief of staff to the president and the CEO, Brian Finley, who I think is great. He manages special projects and advises on strategy. He's worked on technology and geopolitics at the Atlantic Council. It's an A plus, and holds degrees from Georgetown University and Zeppelin University. Is that like Led Zeppelin?
Not quite.
Where is that, Julian? I guess it's in Germany, huh?
Yes, sir. It's at the shores of Lake Constance, all the way in the south of Germany, and named after Graf Zeppelin, who was the founder of and inventor of the Zeppelin. So,
Wonderful. So, are you enjoying yourself being involved over there at Stimson Center? Which tell us a little bit about Stimson Center so everybody can hear.
yes, very much so. I've been working here for about 3 years now and very much enjoy it. Gives you the opportunity to sort of almost continue graduate school, but being paid for it. The Stimson Center itself was an organization founded 36 years ago at the end of the Cold War, so to say. Initially focused more on nuclear and non-proliferation, but has since evolved into a think tank that tackles a variety of issues, particularly under the leadership of Brian that you mentioned. And I'm directing here our Foresight program, which is sort of a systemic way to think about the future, much from a risk but also opportunity perspective.
Well, the thing I like about the Stimson Center, they are fundamentally focused on foreign policy, which I have great interest in, but there also are lapses. There's a lapse between AI and how it affects the entire world. So I wanted to start today, Julian, for people that aren't following this or reading about Anthropic every other minute here. Tell us how you feel overall about AI, and then I want you to tell us, we'll start with the good. Tell us about AI for somebody that keeps hearing about it, but they don't quite know what it is.
All right, that's quite a broad topic, but I think it fits really nicely into what you just said in the sense of that it is something that affects both domestic as well as international politics, quite actively. So I would say. I think the reason why AI now is talked about so much is for a variety of reasons. First and foremost, of course, because the capabilities have been just tremendously powerful and have had a development that I think is, shy of any example of past, at least recent technological revolutions. But it is, of course, first and foremost connected to the increase of compute power. And this is a way of answering your question to those that don't necessarily know what AI actually is. I would say one of the best definitions of intelligence, which I think a lot of people also struggle to know what it truly is that comes from a professor of mine in Germany. I grew up in Germany that said intelligence is the ability to make decisions in the area of non-knowledge. So the term artificial intelligence is actually quite misleading because what AI first and foremost is doing is pattern recognition. I think humans for a really long time have tried to come up with all sorts of graph and abilities to basically recognize patterns. And whether that's an exponential growth or a sinus curve or so on and so forth, we were somewhat limited in our ability to say what the average is and so on and so forth. But as soon as it became really difficult to make probabilistic assumptions, that is where we really got stuck. And so the increase in compute power enabled pattern recognition from vast amounts of data. And AI, as we know it today, particularly in the form of large language models, is doing exactly that. It is a regression analysis of predicting one word following another based on a vast data set that the machine goes through and predicts that I, in most cases, is followed by am. But in other words, it of course becomes more complicated. And the fact that you can develop
All right, Julian, hold on a second
intelligence.
because the lady down the street doesn't have a clue what you're talking about. So let me try to put it in language people can understand. In other words, it looks at patterns.
Yes.
So if you're on your phone and you write in here, the cat followed the blank, probably the answer is going to be mouse. And so we see repetition.
Yeah.
And so it's able to say, this is what's likely to be said. And so it studies patterns, what you usually see and anticipate. So for me, example, I drive a Tesla. I can put my car into autonomous driving. Now I do it literally now 75% of the time. I know where I want to go. I plug in the address and it takes me there. And the reason it does is because it has a memory. It knows exactly what it's seen before. So it knows fundamentally what's kind of on the road and it watches, right? I mean, I think now a lot of people don't like that. They don't trust it, but I do. And to tell you the truth, so does my family, who have urged me to drive autonomously as much as I can because, and it's not just me, but it's everybody. We could be distracted drivers.
Does
You're
that mean
not,
they
it,
trust your driving skills?
I'm saying that we are all, Julian, we all at times become distracted. And so what happens here is the cameras, the sensors, and all that, it doesn't become distracted. Now, that doesn't mean we can trust it 100% because we see it making mistakes. But for people who wonder what it is, it's just anticipating what comes next based on the patterns that it's had in the past. So every time I drive, it learns new things. Every time I go down a route, it sees things and it learns those things. Is that a good way to say it?
Yeah, that is a good way to think about it. Yes.
Okay, so why is this? What's good about it? Tell us what's good about it. Okay, except for my driving, what else do you think AI is good for?
I think that we will see advances and scientific discoveries in fields, particularly the medical field, that have previously been much, much harder to discover because of the limitations of our own capacity. There's a wonderful documentary out there. It's called The Thinking Game on protein structures, for instance. This is what DeepMind and the founder of DeepMind, one of the AI companies, actually was awarded with the Nobel Prize in chemistry because they found a model to do the protein unfolding for in a competition where the gold standard was always that scientific teams from around the world were competing, were given a DNA structure, and then unfolded the protein structure behind it. And they showcased with their model that AI can actually do it much better than humans can because it follows a certain pattern, like you're driving, so to say. And that is where I think the biggest advances lie in terms of scientific discovery, where it is based and doing research on vast sums of data and coming up with pattern recognitions in that data that will be beneficial for humankind.
And why do we care about that? When you brought up that example, how does that affect the lady down the street or the man down the street or whoever who's down the street saying, okay, so why do I care about that? What does that mean when they were able to do that?
I think what it will enable down the road is hyper individualized medicine, so that, for instance, cancer therapies can be much more targeted. They can be much more based on your individual, you know, status as a human being, the kind of disease that you have. I mean, in the past, particularly rare diseases, they were literally not necessarily worth discovering or finding treatments against because there were so little of people that getting those treatments. So it was not worth for a company to bring a drug to the market or to really find treatments against it. And what it will do is it will shorten the scientific discovery process significantly and enable solutions for problems that previously, involved thousands of researchers, thousands of scientists to discover how to get to the core of the problem. And those people, they cost money, they need to invest resources. And that, I think, is the great promise of AI, that it will shorten that time frame and the capital necessary, because it can automate at the end of the day the scientific research and discovery process. And that, I think, in the medical field, whether it's cancer treatment or any other disease that is life-threatening, will probably be the biggest advantage that we will have down the road.
Okay, besides medicine, what else would you put up there that you see as a very positive benefit of AI?
I would also say that, for instance, in infrastructure or in electricity and grid management, where you can automate a lot of the processes. I mean, a good way to think about it is that actually, and this is what I was trying to say in the beginning, I mean, AI is really not something new. We have experienced automation for quite some time. What AI capabilities today can do is that they basically take over fields where previously automation wasn't possible because of the complexity of the task, right? The production-based economy, for instance, is a really good example. And the automation of assembly lines, when the task was rather simple, it could be automated. For instance, I think flying a plane is actually a really good example, right? Most planes, they don't necessarily are being flown by pilots anymore. It's automated, but there's not a lot of traffic in the sky, which is why it's more complicated to have your Tesla be the self-driving machine rather than the airplane that basically just needs to go from A to B, and the pilot has the hand on the steering wheel for landing and the more complex tasks. But humans have started to automate mundane tasks for the time being. And this is, I think, where you see infinite opportunity in automating the tasks that we don't want to do, and automating the tasks that maybe a machine can do way better if there's in dangerous environments, or in hazardous environments where the human life is at risk. And automating those tasks will be a great benefit for those that usually were in harm's way.
What about productivity? Does it help? How will it help a worker to be more productive?
Here, I think it becomes complicated, because what we are witnessing is that we are starting to automate the service industry, the knowledge economy, so to say, right? Like jobs like lawyers or doctors, they are using AI to become more efficient and become more productive. And while in the past, the measuring of productivity, of sort of output economic materials, was way easier to measure. You could say, okay, you could go to a factory line and you could say Ford produces X amount of cars in a year. And when you automate process, or you add an assembly line that was automated, you could say, okay, well, it produced X more amount of cars in a year. Now, when it comes to the knowledge economy, that's much harder to assess. How do you assess a lawyer's productivity? You can say, okay, well, the lawyer can handle 50 instead of 25 cases with the help of AI, but that is much harder to assess. And as we have witnessed, I think one of Trump's obsession with the trade deficit is, of course, for the production-based economy. It's where goods leave the United States or come into the United States, but the United States is no longer necessarily a production-based economy. It's a service-based industry. And now we're not just stating that the production-based economy is automated, but also now the service-based economy. And that will have significant implications.
All right, well, let's talk about the negative. What do you see as the negative side of AI? Understanding that technology never gets stopped. It always is going to move forward, regardless of what people try to do. But of course, at the same time, there's also a possibility of guardrails that can limit the impact. But talk about the negative side of AI.
Yeah, so I completely agree that there is no technology in the history of mankind that didn't diffuse, intentionally or unintentionally, right? So keeping restrictions on technology maybe keeps them isolated for a time being, but at the end of the day, even the most sensitive technologies like nuclear weapons proliferated unintentionally. So I think the same is true for AI and for the power that enables it. So which obviously calls into question the way that this is being dealt with regards to China. I think the negative aspects are sort of two or threefold, I would argue. Um, First, I think that the introduction of technology in the history has always been incredibly disruptive to societies. Think about the introduction of the printing press or the introduction of the steam engine. It just significantly alters societal structures. And I think AI will do the same. So whether it was the Luddites that fought against the automation of their trade in the UK, it will be people that are affected by not labor enabling, but labor replacing technologies. And dealing with that negative aspect of it in terms of equity, in terms of wealth distribution, I think will be a key factor. Mostly around the issue of we are living in a system that is set up.
Julian, hold, let me
Yeah.
1 second. Some people are saying that 30–40% of white collar jobs are going to be wiped out as AI develops. There have been counter arguments to say that's just not true. And secondly, that if it is true, new jobs will be created. So what do you think about that?
Well, I'm going to take a cop-out answer and say both is true. I would point people that are interested in this topic to a book by the economic historian Carl Benedict Frey. He writes about it in what's called the technology trap. And he showcases, first, he distinguishes between labor enabling and labor replacing technologies. And what he means by that is exactly to your point, Governor, of saying, well, some technologies are labor enabling and others are just fully replacing the job of that person. Like, I mean, think of it, for instance, a cashier on a supermarket and the checkout station that's fully replacing that particular labor, or a driver, truck driver or a taxi driver, and so on and so forth. And he showcases, he's an economic historian, so he looks at the technological innovations of the last 100 years, and he showcases that those affected by labor replacing technologies, it takes up to a generation for them to see the benefits of it. And that is the societal impact that I'm worried about. Yes, we can do retraining, we can do continuous learning, but it requires an infrastructure that enables that. It requires the necessity for people to maybe potentially learn a different trade or learning how to use technology. Because I think the reality will be that you're not going to be replaced by an AI, but you're going to be replaced by someone using an AI. So that is using it as a labor enabling technology. And that's my biggest worry, quite frankly.
Well, if you have lifelong learning, um, Julian, does that begin to solve that problem?
I think to some degree,
Constantly improving our skills, learning new positions, or am I just whistling in the dark here? How, and is it going to replace 30–40% of white collar jobs, in your opinion?
I think what it will do is it will not necessarily replace, if you think about the jobs itself, maybe yes, the impact will be that grand, but it won't replace 30 to 40% of the people having those jobs. It will replace those that do not necessarily adapt. And I think, yes,
And
absolutely.
how would you adapt? How would a person go in adapting? Because, we have people that are going to watch that have kids and grandkids, and, what do I tell my kids to do? How can somebody adapt?
I think the person would need to be technologically fluent to the point that you made of yes, it will proliferate regardless. It will be adapted, and if you don't use it, then you're going to be replaced by someone who does. It's similar to doing research and you still go to the library and not use the internet. It will just be so much slower to get to the answer than using those AI tools that enable you to be more productive and more thorough. I think curiosity is a very good piece. I wish that in schools people, were able to follow their own curiosity, and whenever you're curious about something, you're good at something. I believe so. It really is kind of like this ability to follow what you're interested in, and hence be eager to learn new things and be
Yeah,
open-minded.
which are by and large our education system doesn't do. So that's a real challenge, and very, very concerning. Um, so you know, what they say is with each technology comes new opportunities. But what some people who are AI experts say is, no, the AI is so good that it's just going to, the jobs that come to replace the current jobs, it can do those jobs as well. So, like, there's no way out.
Well,
You,
I
you
think what
believe
it
that?
points to, I do not necessarily believe that. What it points to is that the challenge I think that we have is if you think of our taxation system, if you think of our education system, those systems that were set up to deal with different realities. We are basing our taxation, our economic system, our education system on the idea that more economic output has always been associated with labor, right? So the old Ford model, like you produce more cars, meaning more people are employed, you give a tax incentive to a company because at the end of the day, that though this company is hiring more people, those people build communities, they have families, they consume, they basically enable a more prosperous life on site. If you look at the actual numbers, whether that is Nvidia, the second most valuable company in the world, has 30,000 employees. If you look at the investments that Apple is making in the United States, $500 billion creates 20,000 jobs. That's 25 million per one single job. So what we are experiencing is a world in which productivity and economic output is disassociated from labor. And that is, I think, what we need to focus on. We need to find completely new ways of organizing our society because of that disassociation that in the production-based economy has not been there. And I mean, that can be a utopia, right? It can be people can follow their passion, they become artists or whatever, but there needs to be some level, in my opinion, of redistribution so that the benefits don't just go to the people that own the machines, because previously that was what the labor movement or other aspects were about. And I think that is the biggest worry with AI implementation moving
How
forward.
long do we have to address that? How long do we have before, if we don't do it, the whip comes down? We're all kind of befuddled.
I would say years, not decades.
Okay. And so when we talk about guardrails, we have companies that want no guardrails, and they're powerful companies. And we have other companies that say no. I mean, Anthropic stood up against the Pentagon saying we don't want you to use us to surveil citizens or to use weapons that have an automatic aptitude where the man is not even in the loop. Um, what do we do about guardrails? Where's the best way to do it? Is it the companies? Is it politicians? How should we go about doing these guardrails?
I think this is where it becomes really complicated because I think at the end of the day, and this is where we started the conversation, AI is math, right? If you cannot really regulate science, particularly when you have open source model, meaning where the code is available for the developers. I mean, how do you regulate this? Somebody can literally just take the regulation out. So I think where it comes down to is to regulate the applications of AI. And what I mean by that is who is being held reliable, to use your Tesla example, if your Tesla crashes? Is it the company? Is it you because you didn't exercise oversight over the car because you were doing something else? Is it the person that, the environment? So who is liable for the malfunction of AI application? And I think this is where the opportunity lies with regards to regulation, because obviously Tesla, to use that example, will develop a very AI system differently if it is being held liable for the malfunction. Right now, we sort of have an environment where like nobody is really held accountable for mistakes that are made. And I think this is where I would argue the biggest opportunity for responsible regulation comes in is through the question of liability and through the question of accountability in the case of malfunctioning of systems.
Well, but Julian, what do you think about the fact that Anthropic has hired somebody, a Scottish woman, to try to make their AI system, Claude, have values that are sort of consistent with I mean, almost in a way, they're your Judeo-Christian values, right? What do you think of that? Because other companies are not doing that. So what's
Yeah.
your sense?
Well, I think this is where the question becomes really philosophical, to be completely honest. I It kind of blows my mind that one can learn a language simply based on probability. I mean, what does it say about the very conversation that we are having, Governor, of, you could literally invite an AI and it could probably give you better answers to your questions than I can. But what does it say about free will? What does it say about intentionality and so on and so forth? So the way that I currently understand the technology and the current capabilities of the technology is that, yes, you can code, let's say, Judeo-Christian values into an AI system, but the system actually doesn't fully understand what it actually is. It replicates it, it imitates, but it doesn't fully understand what it actually is saying, which is the reason why it hallucinates, as AI researchers call it, right? It comes up with something, and the way that you've explained it in the beginning, it's sort of one word following another, and yes, it makes sense, but whether you are knowing what you're saying is a completely different question. So this is why I'm saying it
Well,
becomes.
but wait a minute, Julian. What do you think about these reports that these AI systems have become scheming? That they have, there are stories about how they are sort of run away, not reflect, and I would just say, Jewish and Christian values, but there's so many sort of Western ethical values that could be put in there. I think that's what the woman is doing with Anthropic. So, how do you react to that? You've got a machine here that's just on a tear and it's doing whatever it wants to do, including plotting against us.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are very deep philosophical questions because I
Well,
think,
are those philosophical questions or are they like real life questions? Everything's not a philosophical question, right? There are some things that are either right or wrong, right?
yeah. So where it becomes a real world question is, like, use an example, for instance, when you say, you talk to your AI agent and you say, I need $100,000. And it can, go in and go into the stock market and try to speculate to get you $100,000, or it can call a bank robber and say,
Right.
I'm going to give you $50,000, and you give me $150,000 out of the vault. This is where it becomes reality. So you can code those systems and say that is unethical behavior.
Yes.
The reason why I say that it is philosophical is because if you talk about those examples where they are developing a consciousness or so on and so forth, where they like run
Yes.
away and do things, start cheating in games and so on and so forth, that implies that they are self-aware, which I don't believe we're there yet. And I think it's actually going to be very hard to get there. But that is the question. Like, I don't know. I mean, probably if we develop AGI, I think it will sort of be a side product, and out of the sudden you have a consciousness. But I am of the belief that language, our way, our ability to communicate, is actually a consequence of intelligence, right? It is our ability to express emotions, um to basically showcase what we're feeling. And what we're doing with AI systems, we're basically teaching it a language and expect it to become intelligent. I'm just not 100%
So you're not sold on that, that
that
it's
exact.
gonna be a human being. So you believe that man will not be taken out of the loop, that man is a critical function in controlling a technology or developing a technology rather than thinking this technology is going to think for itself.
Yes, sir.
Julian, this is very interesting, and what it does say is that our education system needs to be changed, and it's so hard to do it because it's just such a ingrained. I mean, it's like changing the Pentagon. Changing education is like it's so very difficult. But this is helpful, and I think we'll see what kind of reaction we get to this, and then I think maybe we may need to do this again. And now that book, The Technology Trap, is that worth all of us getting?
I think so. It's a good overview of the economic impact of technological transformations in the past.
Oh, one other last question. So you've got this couple down the street. Their kids are either in college or they're ready to graduate or they've recently graduated. Is this world going to be okay for their children?
I think so. I think it will.
Because you know what they're saying is, oh my goodness, my kid's working here. I don't know if they're going to have a job, and you know, oh, it's all coming at us. It's a big storm. I'm out of control. I don't have any power. I don't know what to do. Is there any way we can sort of settle them down and say, with all this working together? I mean, you answer that without my answering it for you.
Well, Governor, I think that in a way, a lot of the problems that we talk about and a lot of the risks that come with technology, it's sort of old problems. It's old risks that are just coming to us in new forms. We've always struggled with the question how to grant equal access to opportunity. We've always struggled with the question on how
Right.
to fairly share prosperity and who to trust. I mean, we all complain that AI systems hallucinate or lie to us, but we're lying to each other all the time. Like humans have always been subject to the conversation of who do you trust? And that is all to say that this is not new. It's just coming in a different form. Technology is a tool. It can be used to do
Well,
good.
you know, that's a very interesting thing, and I wonder, Julian, if there are some writings that have explored this. This is what we saw. This is what happened. This is how we reacted. This is what we're supposed to do. Because history always does repeat itself, both the good lessons and the bad lessons. Is there anything out there, a handy dandy kind of let's take a look, let's consider this, sort of a roadmap for what we should do? Because what you said is interesting. All the threats are always there, the issues are always there, the challenges are always there. They're just coming in a new form. So, what would you recommend?
I mean, I think Noel Harari has some really good books about kind of how to think of lessons from the past and what they mean for the future. I love this intersection of philosophy and technology because I think we're the avant-garde of technological evolution is actually kind of tackling some of those philosophical questions of what it means, what does truth means? I mean, the levels of deception, levels of control through
Yeah.
technology will be through the roof. But at the end of the day, in the past, you could look at a picture or a video and you were to believe it. In a world with AI enabled, you don't know whether it's
Hey,
true.
yeah, so somebody a picture today of when I was a very young man and one I had with Reagan in the Oval Office, and they said, "Is that real or is that AI?" You know, it's interesting. People are beginning to question that. Are we
Exactly. So
capable, if Julian wanted to list a few things here, a few books that people should read, would we be able to add that to this, Chevy? Okay. If you would take a little bit of time and make a recommendation,
happy to.
uh, and I like what you're saying about philosophy and development, anything like that, Julian, might be interesting for all of us to take a look at. So I want to thank you for taking the time today. And as you know, you and I will be spending a chunk of time together in the future, and it should be fun and exciting
Very much looking
and
forward to it.
positive. All right, my friend, thank you so much.
Thank you very much
All
for
right,
having me.
bye.